What are you trying to achieve with these headlines? You're breaking everyone's home ownership aspirations. What's the point of these headlines? It's not correct.
Is this really the message they should be giving young Australians?
The jacket, man.
Well, I've got to be
Looks
half
good,
corporate, half podcast today.
I like it. It's a nice jacket.
Very suave.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
I did, and also I got a little.
Oh, okay.
What is it?
Oh, yeah, that's nice.
Let it start.
That's
Little
very
peek
nice.
out. Little peek out.
Lovely, mate.
Oh, goodness.
Big one today, guys. I think we're ready to roll, Peach. Are we ready to roll?
That'll be the quickest start we've ever done.
Big one today, guys. Well, I'm just conscious that some of us have to have work to do. Some of us have sick kids to look after. So it's going to be a good one, though. This week we're actually talking about the rental trap and something that I haven't heard about before, rental inflation. I think media just puts the term inflation in every headline and sentence now to just see what happens.
It's legit, though.
It is legit. It's actually happening.
Oh, right.
Rent-Flation.
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 Ooh, nice.
Wow.
Rent-Flation.
Yeah, I like
did you
that
make
one.
that up or did you read
Registered the trademark this morning.
that? Done.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Rent vesting, rent
Sorted out the
Rent-vesting,
domain as well.
Rent-Flation.
Rentflation.com.au.
What does it do?
Rentflation.co.
What does the
.com,
website do?
.com, but
I just hold it
You'll
there.
park the domain,
I'm parking
sell it
it.
eventually.
That's his future Bitcoin.
It's how I'm going to be able to buy property when I'm 60.
Wow.
When someone buys that domain from me.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah.
It takes 46 years to save for a deposit. According to
There's
that.
plenty of
Some
time
stupid
for
people.
opportunities and businesses
I
to
just
set up.
anyone that listens to us regularly will
Yeah.
know all of these in-jokes. Anyone new, welcome. I'm your host, Michael Carboni. My
Bye.
friends call me Carbs. With us, as always, the CEO of Coposit, Chris Ferris.
G'day, Carbs.
Chris has been doing the media rounds this week. He's been interviewed by the AFR, the Australian, 2GB radio as well.
That was fun.
So you're very good at this now, and I'd like to think we all have something to do with how good you are in front of the camera
Trained me
and with a
day
mic
one.
in front of you. So welcome back,
Lots
Chris.
of practice here.
Jason
mate.
He, Mr. Kalido loans himself.
Hello.
Bit of feedback and bit of love mail.
Is that right?
Yeah, mate. YouTube. Jonah Copeland says, "Love the show and everyone on it. Jason should start doing some solo stuff about property,
wow.
which he does.
Wow.
But he do really well. Could listen to him all day."
What about the comment underneath, though?
I haven't got that here, but what was the comment underneath?
Who's that Asian guy?
There's an Asian guy in the podcast.
We don't see colour here except for your wonderful shirt, your wonderful jumper. It's
It's
fantastic.
funny I'm wearing yellow.
Yeah,
but-
I did. I stopped myself from saying it. I had to stop myself from saying it. But welcome back, Jace. We love you. We're going to get cancelled after this episode. But 4 episodes in,
fact.
Savannah Lobbe,
Yes.
we're going to get cancelled. So it's been a great run.
Yeah, exactly.
It's been a great run. But
Nice to be
guys,
here.
guys, I'm still introing Sav here. Welcome, Sav. Just welcome. We'll save the special intro for next week. But big topic today, as I mentioned. But first, we're going to jump straight into everyone's favourite segment now, which is Prop Talk.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
So Prop Talk,
We need a jingle for Prop Talk.
we do need a
Yes.
jingle. Paige, let's work on that one. But this one, 2 guys that have been in the industry for a long time, well respected. I like their content typically, but I found this one interesting. So let's go straight to Prop
Interesting
Talk.
in a good way or in a shit way?
Well, let's find out. Let's find out.
shit. shit.
Summertimes may be good. Summertimes may be shit.
Oh, Mr. Panos.
If you're a young person now, 20 years of age, and you got no money, and
So you
you're
just finished school or uni and you
finished school,
got
finish uni,
$1,000 in the bank.
it will take you 20 years to save for a deposit that's going to allow you to comfortably buy a unit in Sydney. A house, if you're age 20, it'll take you to the age of 60 to actually save for a deposit. This is based on you trying to live normally, right? Back in the old days, that was the goal, to have your home paid off by then, not to be saving for a deposit.
Well, you only borrowed money for 25 years in those days.
Correct.
Well, it used to be 23 years of age. The average Australian borrowed money at 23 years of age 15 years ago. Today, the average borrower to buy property is 32 years of age. So basically, they're waiting another 10 years. And if you're starting today, so that's a current statistic, those people would have saved that deposit to buy that house at 32. They would have started back when they're 20. So today, if you start today and you're 20, I think your number's probably right. They're probably going to, it'll be 40 years of age will be the average borrower. And that's when they'll buy their first property.
Mark Bouris, he's been lending money for decades. Tom Panos, he's been selling property for decades. Is this really the message they should be given young Australians?
Look, if it's the facts, yeah, give it, but it's not the facts.
Yeah.
That's the problem. And like, I'm a big fan of Tom Panos. He reminds me of like the drunken uncle at the barbecue, right?
I don't know if he's drunk, but
No, like
he's loud.
you know
The
that
loud
loud
uncle.
uncle at
The
the
loud
barbecue.
uncle.
That's Tom Panos. I really like I like
offended
his
a lot of
content.
people already today.
No,
Yeah,
like I
so-
like his content, but like that's not the right message to be getting out there. Like, I know the article that he's talking about. It's the Finder research where it's picked the most obscure property
I think we spoke about it
in Sydney.
Yeah,
So
recently.
it's a $1.6 million house, saving a 20% deposit. It said 46 years to save for that. But the problem is with that message out there, when an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old sees that message and they see 20 years or even 46 years to save for a deposit, they just go, you know what?
I'll give up.
I'm going to give up on property.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm
Yeah.
going to be doing. And that's the wrong message to be sending out there because it's not factually correct. People, that $1.6 million property that he's talking about is usually the dream property for people and their families.
Yeah.
You need to build up to that. You don't just go straight to that property and buy that property straight away.
Well, Jace,
you
you
build
talk
up to that particular property. Like, why are we getting that message out there? And then I think it's also on Mark Bouris' side. Like, I think he tried to correct Tom a little bit towards the end, but I think he's got an obligation, being in the media, I think he's got an obligation to get the right message out there. I don't care if that's the statistics. He should debunk the statistics rather than inflaming the article and trying to get almost clickbait.
Well, this is why
headlines.
I
Like,
found
it's
this
frustrating.
I found this to be interesting because Mark Bouris, typically, I listen to a lot, I watch a lot of his content. He's like the voice of the people, or that's what he's trying. That's the brand he's trying to like, and he's doing a good job of it, right?
Yeah.
This isn't what the people.
What are you trying to achieve with
What
these
are you
headlines?
achieving by this?
You're breaking everyone's home ownership aspirations. What's the point of these headlines?
And Tom
it's not correct.
Tom Panos, real estate agent, he sees it. I get it. You see the pain out there, right? But like, man,
Is this for the 20% though, as well? What we discussed
Exactly.
last week? Like it's
It's like 20%
Yes.
for a median house
But a
in
house-
Sydney is 46 years. Like, there's apartments that are cheaper. Like, you don't need a 20% deposit anymore. Like,
I suppose it's hard because I suppose by the time that you have saved for a deposit, you might not want to move into an apartment. So then, your aspiration becomes a house because you might have a family already. So I do get where that kind of comes from. But I suppose you had to start earlier with an investment that's smaller, before you actually get to the stage where you need a house.
but the figures are around saving 20%.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's just,
Not everyone's saving 20%. There's ways to get
Yeah.
there. We've spoken about that before.
Yeah.
Multiple
B, Jason, you say it all the time. First home buyers aren't buying the median house in Sydney. They're buying apartments in Sydney or elsewhere.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because like another sort of prop top potential is Jack Henderson. That we watched a couple of weeks ago, but he's trending this week as well because he did a video talking about people need to buy where they can afford, right? So he gave examples of where he grown up, where he lived, and he showed that you can buy a house in Bidwell for about 750 to 800K, right? With the government incentives and benefits available for first home buyers, you can do it with a 5% deposit. That's 40 grand. So you can't be telling people it's going to take you to 60 years old to save 40 grand to buy a house. That's
it's
not a
just not
$1.6 million house. But if you really wanted a house and you were flexible and you're buying where you can afford and you're buying with your partner, that's realistic. That's practical.
yeah.
100%.
It doesn't make sense. Like, I did a search this morning in the three capital cities of Melbourne, Sydney, and Queensland, or Brisbane rather.
Yeah.
I did a search of properties under 600K, and there was hundreds of listings in each capital city.
You're looking at buying one?
yeah.
There's hundreds of listings under 600K
Yeah.
within the capital cities that people can afford.
Yeah.
And again, using Jason's 5% deposit model, you're talking 30 grand. If you're a first home buyer, you're probably not paying stamp duty.
Yep.
Get some advice on that. But you're not talking 46 years. We're talking a couple of years, 3, 4, 5 years to save 5, 10 grand a year to get into those properties. So like, I think the message that they're getting out there is it's typical irresponsible headlines and shouldn't be the message getting out there.
I think so
It's not
too.
correct.
I expect better from those two, and I love both their content. I think Mark Bouris will probably be the Prime Minister in the next decade of Australia, but that's not the right message to send out. So come on, do better, guys. This week's topic, loosely related, right? So we're talking about the rental trap or Rent-Flation.
Rent-Flation.
Yes.com.au. There was, and it's inspired by an article in Domain recently. The heading was "Very Broken Housing System, More High Income Earners Stuck in Rent Trap." And I asked ChatGPT to give us a bit of a summary of that, and I edited it a little bit so that the robots aren't
Gotta
taking
love
over.
AI.
They still need our help. But the article highlights how even high income earners are increasingly trapped in renting due to unaffordable property prices. The rental demographics are shifting, with more affluent individuals and families choosing to rent rather than buy homes. The reason behind this trend includes soaring property prices, stagnant wage growth, and stringent lending criteria, which collectively contribute to making home ownership unattainable for many. I've heard about rent-flation for the first time this week. Is this something that we're all familiar with this term?
No. Explain
You
to
haven't
me.
heard that?
No.
Yeah, do you guys know?
No, I haven't heard the actual term coined like that, but we all know that rent has been increasing for a long time, right? It's always something that's talked about in the media, how expensive is the demand for rental properties. So you see some of the videos where there's 50 people lining up for one rental application. Like, I don't know how that actually works if you're the 49th person in the queue.
Yeah.
What's the point?
Some of the figures, so there's been circa 8% annual increases in rent. I don't know how true that is
No,
across the board,
it's
but yeah,
8%.
that's true, 8%. And vacancy rates at historical lows, 1.1% across Australia as well. And again, it's going to be different in suburbs and pockets and cities, but across the board, that's a very low number, which all these things, amongst others, means that rent is increasing. It's definitely happening.
It's definitely increasing. And I think that 1.1% vacancy rate is definitely contributing to the fact that there's a rental crisis. Rent-flation, or rent inflation, however you want to coin it, Jace, it's been at 8%, and they're forecasting that to actually go to 10 to 11% over the next few years, purely because of the lack
Scary.
of housing supply and where immigration has come in, taking up the rental supply stock. So they do see inflation or rent inflation continuing to rise over the next few years, so increasing rents.
And you've touched on the increase in rent-flation or rent inflation has a big impact on overall inflation.
That's right. That's the underlying one, right?
It's part of the basket of goods.
Yeah.
So the overall number, so that headline number, rent inflation is part of that basket of goods. So, if you've got high rent inflation, that's going to impact the actual headline inflation or the overall CPI number.
Do we have to start saying inflation, like chip inflation, petrol inflation? Do we have to start calling everything
all
something
there.
inflation?
Everything's inflation.
Everything's
Yes.
inflation.
Don't get me started on petrol. I think that's going to offset.
Petrol
How's
inflation.
inflation going to come down?
Hey guys,
There's
petrol's
this,
been a little bit cheaper this
It
week.
has,
So
it has.
fill up, get an extra
Doesn't
tank.
start with a 2.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go. Jason, you told me, we had a chat about this earlier. You said
Yep.
you're seeing examples of rentflation all around you. Can you give us some specifics examples? I know you got your note sheet there.
Yeah, I've got some numbers jotted down, but look,
I thought he was
just
talking about his landlord properties. I keep jacking them up and people just keep...
he's not serious, guys. He's not serious.
It's like I keep putting it up every week and it
Don't
doesn't...
come at me. Don't come at
It's
me.
like Albanese selling his house.
Yeah.
No, all
You
right.
can either
Anyway.
laugh or cry later, Michelle.
But whenever I look around, for example, on realestate.com.au, just being curious around the areas that I live in or around where my clients are buying, I'm always shocked at how much the rent is for certain properties. I'm seeing apartments. So we did a loan for a client who bought a 2-bedroom off the plan apartment in Western Sydney next to the train station and got rented out straight away after settlement for $980 a week.
Two better.
Two better. Right. And you would usually think, because when you buy off the plan, sometimes is that everybody settles at the same time. So if you're an investor and you put your property on the market for rent, usually it means that you can't really get a really good,
Because there's a lot of other.
There's a big
properties.
influx at the one
right.
point
So
in time.
if I'm a tenant, there's like 10 2-bedders
Yeah.
and they're pretty much the same. I have a lot of choice. So I was really shocked that it's rented for $980 a week, right? So I did some calculations and that's 51 grand a year. Right. So to have 51 grand after tax, you have to earn $63,000, right? So that's like someone's
just rent.
full-time income just on rent. And then I saw some others. I recently came across a duplex, which my client owns. They've relocated to overseas. They put it on the market. So it's a 4-bedder, but it's $1,200 a week asking rent.
How does that work?
So that's it's
Sorry,
not
same location?
it's similar location, right? It's not super close to the station. That's just the way it is, right? So $1,200 a week. Like, I haven't seen numbers like that.
But hold on, the 4-bedroom duplex is only getting $300 more?
Yeah, but
Than a
maybe it's
2-bedroom
not as
apartment.
close to the station. Yeah, but still, like I think that 2 better is definitely way high. But even for me, like for a 4-bedroom duplex at $1,200 a week,
it's
like
massive.
it's not brand new. You know, it's a few years old. But I'm seeing houses at $800 a week, where in the past it used to be $650 a week.
Can I dig in a little bit? Sorry, Mike. Can I dig a little bit on that? So 51 grand a year. They say roughly if more than 30% of your income goes towards housing costs, that's like the mortgage stress or the rental stress level. So what does that equate to as a salary? If it was 30%, so 51,000 is 30% going to, you need to be earning about 160, 170
as a household.
What's before tax,
But
right?
but you probably have 2 people earning an income in that household, right? Can you imagine if you're by yourself and paying 51 grand in rent? Like that's not possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
But if you got 2 adults working, that just means one person's salary is pretty much going towards the rent.
And this is where the article digs into. So it's people earning $140,000, $150,000, $160,000, $170,000.
Yeah.
Typically, people with that sort of salary would be able to afford a mortgage,
Well,
and they'd be
on
buying their
that,
home.
so what could they borrow?
Yeah.
If they're
Yeah,
spending
exactly.
51
What's the reverse?
If they can spend 51 grand on principal and interest payments,
Yep.
what does that get them? Or even
Okay.
interest only, right? Like that's.
I'm glad you
I'm
asked that
putting on the
question.
spot.
I'm glad you asked that question. So, $980 a week is about $4,246 a month, right? So $4,246 a month is approximately the repayment for a loan of $685,000 on the average interest rate of 6.3%.
Okay.
So that means if you're able to afford the rent of $980 a week, you can manage the repayments of a loan for $685K.
And so how much was that unit? How much did that unit cost? to buy?
About 760 grand.
So it's just short.
No, it's there.
Yeah.
Because you got, so if you.
Oh, if you have the deposit.
Yeah, so you got a deposit.
Right.
So
Yeah.
like 750, you got a
Yeah.
75 grand deposit.
Correct. So if
It's
we do
stamp
the
duty,
model
right?
of a 5% deposit, if you borrow 685, you can buy a property of 720,000 as a first home buyer with a 5% deposit of 36K.
So you're saying if that person that rented that property for 980, they had a 5% deposit,
Yep. Of 36 grand.
the amount that they're paying that landlord for rent,
Yeah.
they could just be paying their own mortgage.
And what's
Principal
also
and interest.
what's also interesting,
correct?
right? And the other thing is you can't compare the rent you pay to the principal and interest repayment. And the reason is rent is an expense. Interest is an expense in your repayment. The principal is not an expense. The principal is you paying back the bank of the money they lent you. So the interest on that loan of 685 is actually only 3,600 a month. It's actually less than the
So
So
rent
you're
you
losing
pay.
less money, basically.
Right, but you still got to
Yeah.
have the cash flow,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You still got to pay $4,246 a month in repayment. But I'm just saying the distinction needs to be made: is rent is not equal to
So,
principal
like,
and interest
No, but
repayment.
why do you think people aren't buying that? Like, why isn't that couple buying? Like, if you got 51
Stock,
grand,
maybe?
why aren't you buying?
I think I know the answer. It's very easy for four of us to sit around here calculating the numbers and saying, look, you could have a mortgage for the same amount, right? But what's stopping you originally? You need that deposit. It's a 5% deposit,
Correct.
10%
Correct.
deposit,
Yeah.
right?
Correct.
It's the 20% deposit, according to Tom Panos
Yeah.
and Mark Bouris.
Let's debunk it.
So
No more 20%
so
deposit.
so people. This is the thing. We've got people renting a property when they could service the mortgage for that exact same property, but the reason they can't buy it instead of rent it is because they haven't saved up the deposit.
No, the reason is they're listening to podcasts
Potentially
that are
that
saying
too,
you need,
yeah.
it takes 46
Yeah.
years to save a 20%
Yeah.
deposit when you don't in
Well-
fact need a 20% deposit.
Yeah.
There's
That's
a lot
exactly
of, I think there's a
right.
lot of misinformation out there about
Or
that.
it could be that they want to buy a house, and for $720,000,
They can't.
you can't buy
that
a
like
house
a-
in the area that you want to live in.
Yeah, they view what they're renting as a stepping stone to where they actually want to live.
Yeah. I mean, it's like we're thinking of these as households, but I think
Yeah.
a lot of the renters and where we can see an increase, it's actually families also splitting up. So it's single households as well.
Yeah, exactly. Look,
That's
it's
a
a
good
mix.
point.
It's definitely
Yeah.
a mix of both. We can't. It's not all the same brush.
Yeah,
right?
but this is definitely a phenomena of, the more recently that there's a lot of divorces happening with people splitting up. There's more houses needed, less income to then save. If you don't have a deposit, you're stuck in
You're stuck.
rental
So
for a long time.
I'm looking at the financial side. So
Yeah.
the deposit is the big issue. But if you've got the deposit, why aren't you buying that? Like
Yeah,
from
exactly.
purely from a
Yeah.
financial point of view.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And it could be a stock level thing.
yeah.
So this is the rental trap.
That's
Yeah.
the trap.
Exhibit
Yes,
A, right?
that's
Like
the
this
trap.
is people earning 150, 160, or couples earning 150, 160, and they're renting.
Yeah.
Where traditionally they should be buying.
I think one of the
Or
biggest
could be
issues
buying.
too is people would back in the olden days. Let's
What are
say,
the olden days? Like,
well, I don't know.
give me a year.
My kids think when I was a kid was the olden days, but I think when my parents were kids is the olden days. Let's say back in the 90s, right, for example. People might often see renting as like a step towards eventually buying.
Yep.
And if renting is more affordable, there's less rent-flation, then you can rent and maybe save a little bit as well, and then eventually buy your own place. But with figures the way they are at the moment, it's very hard for someone to pay that two-bedder in Lidcombe.
Yeah.
You're paying $980 a week.
Yeah.
You also have to save enough for your deposit so then you can eventually buy. This is the trap, right? How do you get out of renting into ownership? Because look, renting has a place. It's important, right? That people need accommodation and not everyone can buy. But at some stage, the aspiration, you say it all the time, Chris, the aspiration has
Fades
to
away.
be, let's buy.
Well, it fades away at the point. If you get to a point where you're just not saving, you can't put. And we know from some of the work we do that a lot of people live week to week,
Yep.
paycheck to paycheck. If you're paying a stack of rent and you can't get to a savings goal,
Yep.
and then you see other articles like it takes 10 years and 20 years, you'll throw it in and say, you know what, stuff this. I am gonna go and collect memories instead of trying to buy a property,
Yeah.
and you spend your money on holidays and different things, and that's also fine.
Yeah.
But you lose the aspiration of home ownership.
This episode is brought to you, as always, by Coposit. And if you're stuck in the rental trap, then Coposit may be your answer to get your foot in the door with property. So check out coposit.com.au for more and enjoy the rest of the show. It probably becomes a problem towards the end when you're ready
Absolutely.
for retirement and you don't have that asset.
That's a scary number. Yeah. It's like I read that half the renters in retirement live in poverty. Like that's just, if you don't have a home, like, yeah.
So Sav, is renting, we hear about people renting forever now. Is it a forever option, do you think?
I definitely think so. I think where it becomes tricky is if it's not a choice, right? If you are aspiring to live in a house and buy your own house and you don't have that choice, that I think is a very tricky situation to be in. But if it's a choice, there's people that want to live a certain lifestyle, that don't want to be stuck in a location, and there's also other ways to build wealth.
Yep.
So if you're choosing to, rent forever, that can definitely be an option, and you can still create wealth. Like, property is not the only way.
Yep, of course. But if you're stuck,
That's
That's the
the trap.
issue.
Like,
That's the trap.
yeah.
Exactly.
I think that's the trap. I think like short term, as a young person, renting and living life like that's completely fine. But I think if you then get to the point of heading into retirement, I think it's super dangerous to be renting. Not only can you get kicked out at any point in time, and you may, like, if you were kicked out over the last 2-3 years as an elderly person, maybe retired, trying to find another rental, like, I couldn't imagine what they're going through.
Oh,
To
yeah.
try and find, like, that poverty line you talk about, Sav.
Yeah.
Like, how are they actually trying to find another property and get in from a rental perspective? I think it's extremely dangerous. We know how important it is, home ownership towards retirement age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Now, what impact?
superannuation doesn't, like, calculates in that you've got your own home. So whatever you're saving up to, to retire with is often not enough
Correct.
to live.
So how do we, I guess, break the rental cycle? And we can probably go around the circle here, and we can probably split it. Like, what can you do personally yourself if you're in the rental trap? But what can government, business, we always end up talking about government, business, education. What can Australia do to help these individuals as well? I'm going to start with you, Sav.
Look, I think it starts earlier on. So I feel like often with these problems, like, I kind of think, okay, well, my own situation, but also what should I have done? What should I have told my younger self? And obviously raising a daughter, like, it's very, very important to think about these things. So I do think from a household perspective, it's obviously talking about saving, budgeting, starting from an early age. Because I do think if you don't start early, then you do become stuck in this rental trap. And that's why people, in their 30s who are looking to buy can't buy. But then I also think there's, schooling, what we talked about last week. Schooling is very important to also talk about saving and budgeting from an early age. So I do think that is kind of the core. Like, how else are you going to get there?
Is there a way, so say you're in your 30s, maybe 40s, and you don't have a time machine to go back and say, actually, maybe I should do it this way.
Yeah.
What can you do if you're stuck in this at the moment, if you're stuck in this continuous cycle and flow? Is there anything that you can do?
Well, I think getting the education and the right information out there. Like, again, if you're listening to wrong articles that are saying 20% deposit, I think go and see your position and find out what exactly you need to be doing.
Yep.
But you need to formulate a plan. Like if you don't have any savings, then there's probably nothing that you can do immediately.
Yeah.
You need to formulate a plan.
Yeah.
And if that plan is saving 10, 15 grand a year, like
Yeah.
work towards that.
Yeah.
And in 5 years' time, you've got 50 to 75 grand. You can buy a property with 50 and 75 grand.
So get your budget in order.
Get your
to
budget
start
in
with.
order and like just start with 10 grand a year. Just
I
try and save 10 grand a year and put it away. And like if it means a few sacrifices, you're gonna have to do it.
I think the time
If you want
thing,
property, right?
the time thing is important advice. You're not going to go from here to there.
It's not gonna happen.
like that. You need to actually map that out and understand it's small wins, and then those small wins compound, and the snowball
Just
rolls
start
down
small.
the hill.
Like start like even if it's 5 grand, 10 grand, like start small. But I think coming back to Sav's point, like that's what you can do right now. But if you're someone like if you're a young person at like even like from 16 to 20, there's I think there's really two important considerations that you're going to make at the age of 18, and it's do I go to uni or do I not?
Yep.
Do I start working or do I go to uni and accumulate a HECS debt? And that decision at the age of 18, it's not just about do I go get a degree or do I not? It's like you need to. I feel like as well now with where the cost of university and where that's gone and the cost of housing, you almost need to consider do I go and get a degree and delay housing by 5 to 10 years because that's what it's going to do, or do I go and get into the workforce and potentially buy a house faster? And like, is the degree necessary for your job? Or do you skip uni altogether and not accumulate the HECS debt and buy a property maybe at the age of 25? Because if you're in the workforce from 18 to 25 and you can save 10 grand a year, getting it to in 7 years, 70 grand. You can buy a property with 70 grand.
There's another one as well, right? At that age.
Yep.
Can I stay at home? Or do I move out of home?
Yes.
And I think just looking into the future, there's probably a whole topic on the hotel of mum and dad, which we can talk about. So, but these are the big decisions at that age. And I guess spinning that back the other way, if you're in your 30s or 40s,
Go back
is
and live
going
with mum and
back.
dad.
No, but is
It's a genuine option.
I do know
Yeah.
people that have done
Yeah,
that.
is it an option? And it's harder at that. Maybe it's a
No,
it's a
you know
pride
what?
thing at that stage.
I
don't
think
know.
you're onto something. I think we've
Yeah.
got to break the stigma.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
go back and live with mum and dad, and mums and dads out there, let your kids come back for a couple of years, get on a strict plan or whatever it is. But like, I think it's super important. I think you're onto something with this because I think it's really important that mums and dads can either help, and there's multiple ways they can help, whether it's gifting or giving equity or letting them live at home. I think that's a huge help.
It's a good idea.
That's a good point.
That's maybe a future podcast episode. We'll get all our parents in and ask them live if they will let us move back in and just see what the reaction is. I think that'll
Parents
be it.
react.
But it's true, right? And I think it's really funny because I think as a parent, I would always want my kids to know that they can always come back at any age. Yeah. But maybe on the flip side, there's a pride thing. I think about if I had to ask my parents now, can I come back? Is that
But would you do it though if you were doing renovations to your house?
if I was doing renovations,
Right? Like
if I was building, I would definitely
it's
move
a
in.
stigma though.
Yeah,
Then
but
I think the renovation
Yeah.
though, people do it with the renovations because there's a fixed end date.
Yeah,
Like when the renovations are done, I'm getting the hell out of here, mum
Which
and
is
dad.
always pushed back a few extra months as well.
Yeah,
But look,
of
people do
course.
it all the time. Hey,
Yeah.
we're building.
Yeah.
So I moved
Yep.
in with my parents for 6 months. So is it like saying, hey, look, we're saving for a deposit for a house. Can I move back in for a year with my parents? A year's not a long time.
In the
Yeah,
scheme
you know
of
what,
things.
Dad? If you're listening, I'm going to give you a buzz up.
And then he'd be like, how much do I have to give you that you don't come over here?
Yeah.
How much do you
what's
need?
me not coming back worth to you?
200 grand or 300 grand you need? What's the gap? Take my money.
I think that's a great point, Mark. Like
Yeah.
I think that should be encouraged, and there should be really breaking the stigma of living with mum and dad, or mum or dad, whoever.
Yeah. That's a great... Anything else to add to that, Jace? I think that's a pretty good...
Man, I think the only thing I would add is around, I think the regulators can do something around the borrowing capacity for first home buyers. So, you guys talked about why wouldn't someone who's able to pay this rent buy property since they're paying the same amount?
Yeah.
But the problem is when you're applying for a rental property, you don't go through a lending assessment
Yeah.
of how much you can afford,
Yeah.
right? If you've got a full-time job, you're stable, you're approved. When you get a loan, the bank's assessing your ability to repay at 10% at the moment.
Yep.
Now, even though you're paying 6.3%, you got to show the bank I can afford 10%.
10% interest rate, right?
Correct. If you got HECS, your borrowing capacity is reduced. Right. If you got a car loan, your borrowing capacity is reduced. You got kids, your living expenses reduces your borrowing capacity. So people are affording and paying every week $980, but they can't get a loan with the same repayment. right? And that's the frustration that they're experiencing because of the buffers put in place,
that's
you know,
interesting.
to have a strong, banking economy, that we're not lending money to people who may not be able to afford it, that they have the buffers to withstand any interest rate increases. I think something needs to be done. Yeah, not saying that just lend money to anybody, but for particular situations, I think there needs to be more scrutiny on who can get a potential benefit to be able to borrow more under an exceptional situation.
So is that up to the lenders?
That's up to the regulators.
The
Because
regulators.
the lenders don't set the rules.
Yep.
The regulators are the ones that enforce you got to add 3% to the actual interest
buffer.
rate of the loan, and that's how you calculate affordability. So the lenders would love to be able to lend more money with a lower requirement or barrier to entry, but it's the regulators that's controlling that.
As an extreme side note, well, not really, but I think I've always found it really interesting that property managers, like, they can let people into properties, and there's not like, it's about how much can they pay per week, can they afford the rent, but there's no financial assessment. Anyway,
No.
that's a side note. I've
No,
always
it's a
found that
side
really
note.
interesting.
We're gonna end it with another video, and this is it's not a prop talk, but it's from TikTok, I think. So maybe it is a second prop talk. Such a popular segment. We bring it back a few times, but this is about some reforms in Queensland around property, around rentals. Sorry, I should say. So let's have a look at that. Where are we? Hello, page. Clip it. Edit it. What am I doing?
Bro, you really struggle with this.
So bad. Technology.
It's the pressure.
So reforms in Queensland. We might stop and pause this along the way because there's a few little things that are happening up there. Let's have a look.
Holy shit. We're in a housing crisis and Parliament has actually stepped up. Yesterday in Queensland, Parliament passed strict reforms for tenants and landlords, and it's a game changer. We're going to talk about 3 really quickly because there are so many, so I'll do a part 1 of probably about 10. First of all, rent bidding. This has been massive. Tenants offering above a listed price to secure a property and landlords saying, yes, happy days, we'll take it. Properties advertised for $650, we'll offer $700, sign us up. Nah, new reforms say hell to the no. This is not going to happen. It cannot be accepted. We're levelling the playing fields. Secondly,
Interesting one, right? So there's no bidding
Yeah.
for rents anymore. You know, it's listed at $650. That's the
That's
price.
great.
We
Right.
assess everyone at the same sort of
Yeah.
level. I can't come in and say, yeah, I'll give you $700.
Yeah.
What do you think? No, question it if you
So will the landlord just say 800 and then let people bid up to that price?
potentially. Yeah, look, potentially. Is there an issue there on that
I don't
side
know.
of things?
Yeah, look, is it rent bidding only up, right? So what about if it's on the way down?
Yeah.
So like if they
interesting.
put it at 800 and then
Very interesting. Let's keep going. Love the guy's hair.
secondly, paying money in advance. Tenants with a bit of cash in the bank saying, right, we'll pay 6 months rent in advance to secure the property. Nah, not going to happen anymore. It's illegal moving forward under the reforms. Dates to be advised, but basically 2 weeks is all a tenant can pay in advance and a property manager cannot receive anything more than that. This is huge.
I wonder if that's an issue because if you've got the means, like, doesn't that make you a good tenant, or doesn't that mean you're able to do this? I don't know.
no, look. To me, if you get into the property, you can still do it. I think what they're trying to avoid is you using that as a bargaining chip
Yeah.
at the beginning.
Yeah.
So like the 4 of us are going for a property. If you've got all the money up front and you say, "Oh, I'll give you all the money up front," that's desirable for the landlord. But you can do it once you're in the lease.
Yep. Gotcha.
Huge. And thirdly, I don't even know how they're going to police this, but this is rent increases for a property, okay? Not just the tenancy, a property. If a property has had a rent increase in a 12-month period, it cannot have another one, even if it's sold, okay? This is for the property specific. I do not know how they're going to police it.
I don't know if Anthony Albanese will like that one based on that.
This is a game changer. You can't turf a tenant out, then sell it to somebody else and then rack the rent price up. You can't turf a tenant out and then put another tenant in and charge whatever you want. It's not going to happen. These reforms are really a game changer. Like the video, comment, and then Google the shit out of it. Because if you're a tenant or a landlord, you need to know your rights and you need to know what's happening moving forward.
Thanks, James. That was good. I like that.
Wow.
That was
Yes.
good.
What do you think about the last one, guys? So there's probably like one increase per year.
Yeah.
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 We've got to find this.
Seems reasonable.
We've got to find a balance between like
Yeah.
free market and
Yes.
Yeah.
not.
Yes.
And it's hard because like from a landlord perspective, it's a business. And if you own one investment property, you're not
Yeah.
this like rich mogul.
Well, it's tricky when interest rates go up. Like you're out of pocket a lot more.
Yeah,
which
but
I
gen-
think
but
is a
But generally, you're doing one increase a year
That's
anyway,
right,
right?
yeah.
Because the lease is a year. So,
Yeah, okay.
unless the lease is a 6 month, so you can't just go increase the rent during the lease
right, okay.
period, right? So the lease is signed for a year. So the lease is up for renewal. You'll revise the rent.
So you can't put it up.
I don't think
Well,
you can.
someone
Like if
is
you got a
living in
signed
there.
lease.
No, if you got a lease in
yeah,
place,
you have a
generally
lease in
fine.
place,
Right,
but
okay.
it's the people where the lease is expired. I think it's an ongoing basis, and then they whack it up by like $150 a week.
Okay.
That's
So
the
there's
shocker.
no cap here what you can increase the rent by.
I don't think there's a cap.
No, okay.
No.
There's no cap.
Yeah.
Look, I think they're actually good reforms.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Do you
Pretty
think
good.
the
I
rest of
particularly, look, to be honest, I particularly like the one about the second one about someone can't come in and paying 6 months
Yeah.
up front because
Yeah.
it's pretty unfair. Like
Yeah.
if it can be used as a bargain chip. Like from an agent perspective, it's very attractive for the agent as well because they just collect the money. They don't need to chase you for 6 months. The landlord's happy, but it's it is unfair, right?
It's
So-
it's leveling the playing field. I agree
Yeah.
with across
Yes,
the
I
board.
agree.
Then the question becomes, how do you determine who should be in? If you've got 50 people lined up and everyone's level, then how do you determine who gets that rental? I mean, that's a good question for the agents. Maybe there's some more assessment that can
Well,
go.
maybe it just makes it easier, to be honest,
Yeah,
because
potentially.
you're not then having to pick who you're putting in.
Is there
right?
just
It's
a wait list and it's like
Yeah,
you go
just-
here, you go
Yeah.
there, you're next.
Maybe
you're
they
next
get
in
like the
line.
bingo ball
Yeah,
or
you're
number
next-
21. Yeah, you're up.
That's a great idea. Do you think we
Love
might
that.
see reforms like this if they work in Queensland? Is it something that could happen nationally? Like, is it needed nationally?
Yeah, probably in some. I mean, look, those lines we talk about, some of the rental lines out the door. They're not. That's not in every area.
Correct.
In Sydney, it's like in the hot spots.
Yeah.
But I mean, if it works, why not?
I suppose I just think of like social housing, how we were talking about it before. It's like that's decreasing. Is this something that can help people in some sort of way? I don't know.
Potentially, I think they still need to be doing
Like
the social
the
housing
reforms.
stuff.
Yeah, of course. But if the rent can't increase.
Lots to think about. We're not going to solve all the problems, but we try to every single week. So if you enjoy
Yeah.
this, if you didn't get the Albanese joke, watch last week's episode because there's jokes everywhere. There's like these ongoing jokes that the regular listeners are just going to love.
Are you gonna wear a jacket every week?
Look, it's cold today. It's cold. I'm actually covering our co-posit, even though it's right there. Yeah. Great episode as always, guys. I love chatting to you guys. Can't wait to come back next week. And if you're enjoying it as well, please make sure you subscribe. Please make sure you tell your friends. We've got a lot of you watching on YouTube, which is fantastic. But I encourage, if you are on Instagram, TikTok as well, jump on, find us. It's propertynow_co. Jump on, give us a follow. Give us some likes, and let's try and grow this community together. It's been great having you again this
Thanks,
week,
guys.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Carl.
Great
Thank
chat.
you, everyone.
Yeah.
The Property Now podcast offers opinions on Australian property news for informational and entertainment purposes only, and they are general in nature. It does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. It does not constitute professional advice. Always seek expert guidance before making any property-related decisions.